Hello, Dr. DeLyser, and welcome to Computer Science Chats. How are you?
Good. Hi, Victor. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. So I have several questions to ask you. First, could you please introduce yourself and your educational and career background?
Sure. Hi, CS Chats community. My name is Dr. Leigh Ann DeLyser. I am currently the executive director and co-founder of an organization called Computer Science for All. And we are working at the national, state, and local level to make sure computer science education gets into every school and every community across America. And I came to this work through a variety of different pathways. I myself was a high school computer science teacher for a decade, also taught at universities and colleges, some of which you may have heard of, NYU, Carnegie Mellon, well as some community colleges nearby where I lived. And through all of that, I have loved algorithms and data and programming and figuring out cool ways to make the computer do things a little bit different than what it already does.
Thank you. So what is it that inspired you to originally pursue computer science education as a career?
Having to pay for college, just like flat out. So I grew up in rural America. I grew up in a small little town in upstate New York in a log cabin that my father built on a mountain. My high school served 5 towns, and I graduated with 50 kids. So that tells you a little bit about the population density and everything in that area. And I remember my high school guidance counselor, I went into her office because my dad was an out of work truck driver, and I asked for a book of scholarships. And I had always loved math and science. I was on our school science Olympiad team. I was on our state finalist math counts team in middle school. Like I was that nerd. That was me. And my high school guidance counselor looked at me and she went, "You want to go to college?" Which of course made me even more resolved to like go. But coming from that like rural American setting, like you loved math and you were a girl, you were either going to be an accountant or a teacher, right? And I chose teaching because I thought accounting was boring. And I figured as a teacher, I also got to, because I had some really amazing math teachers who showed me how fun it was to play with numbers and geometry and all of that. Like there was real joy when we got to some of those like open-ended projects that at the end of the year where you're all like, oh man, what's the teacher going to give to us now? But they were joyful. And I wanted to be a part of that as my like cycle of being. So I went to college to study math education, and my boyfriend worked in the career services office, and I needed work study to pay for college, which is something you do when it's part of like your financial aid package. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to give you financial aid, but you have to work too. But we guarantee to hire you, so it's not like you have to go off campus and do it. And so I worked in the career services office, and he was a computer science major, and he had built the database system, like how the career services tracked what students went to internships, what kind of jobs they got when they graduated. It's really cool, right? And I started working on that system while I was working for the office, also like typing resumes and mailing them out to employers. And eventually took over his job as the database analyst, took computer science classes as a minor, added on to my math education major, and ended up like working in the summer for a financial services firm building their database systems. And when I got my first teaching job, the school was like, oh, you know, computer science, here, you can have all the computer science classes. And I got to engage in some like really cool projects. And I figured out it was one more way for both my love of math and data to complement this idea that part of my day could just be building cool things. And as a teacher, I got a lot of freedom over that. I don't think people realize sometimes, like I didn't have a boss telling me that I had to build my own version of a chat room for my classroom, but I could do that with my students, right? And it felt really cool and really fun to live in this space where, you know, as technology grew and changed, we could play with it and see what we could do with it. And I got to go on that journey with a different group of kids every year. And it was really fun.
Wow, that's a really unique path. So, what is it that inspired you to shift from teaching in a high school or at colleges to eventually founding a computer science nonprofit?
Yeah. So when I sometimes give talks to young women about being in computing or things, one of the pieces of advice I give is you have to be ready when opportunity opens a door. And sometimes you just got to like close your eyes and step through it. So I had written a textbook about computer science, and I had had the amazing opportunity to go to Carnegie Mellon, first as a faculty member and then as a graduate student to earn my PhD. And by the way, that's backwards. Most of the time, they won't let you teach until you actually like earn the higher degree. Um, and while I was there, I got involved in opening a new high school in Pittsburgh called the Pittsburgh Science and Technology Academy. Shout out to my friends in Pittsburgh if any of them are going to that school and watch this. Hi, I'm really excited about the work you do and would love to hear about it. Um, and I got connected actually by one of my former high school students. So this should tell you all about the kind of teacher that I am, is they were not allowed to be my friends on Facebook while they were in school. But after a year past graduation, if they wanted to come find me on Facebook, they were allowed to come find me on Facebook and friend me. And most of them did. And so one of my former high school students connected me to one of his professors at NYU who was doing this work around computer science education in New York City. And I was in the lingo, something called all but dissertation. It means I had done all of my coursework, most of my research, and literally was just writing the end of my PhD. And so I got involved with this NYU professor, helped them open a series of schools in New York City called the Academies for Software Engineering, and helped New York City launch its work. And so when President Obama in 2016 stood up and said computer science education is the very first priority in the State of the Union, first of all of us who've been doing it for like 20 years, like jumped up and down and screamed. And not a lot of people know this, but he put out a plan with a $4 billion price tag, which was literally based on our model in New York. He had consulted with us, well, not him directly, but his staff had consulted with us around what we were doing and how, and CS4All as a national movement actually grew out of that call to action from the White House. And we really thought about, like, in New York City, we didn't have one answer. We didn't have one curriculum to rule them all, right? Because if you know anything at all about New York, you know that the Bronx is a very different place than Manhattan. And that Manhattan is a very different place than Staten Island. And that even neighborhoods within Brooklyn are all very different from each other. Every place has its own unique culture and flavor and values. And so the computer science that existed in those schools had to be reflective of those local community values and strengths. And so that model for New York City was something that actually fit really well across our country. Because what worked in New York might not be the same thing that works in San Francisco, and absolutely won't be the same thing that works in Idaho. And so we launched CS4All based on the work we had been doing in New York. And it's just such a testament to how strong our nation is, that this model of like individual communities have value and strength is the thing that's really driving the work from RC.
Yeah, that's super interesting and inspiring. Could you describe some of the activities that you do currently through your work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, you brought me on to talk about computer science, right? And I'm talking a lot about social change and politics in my everyday work. We're actually working with school districts and community leaders to think about the implications of the new CHIPS Act. So CHIPS is the new federal legislation that's putting a lot of money into the production of microcontrollers, right? And silicon chips being manufactured here in the United States. There's a ton of money for education in that because they need a workforce of people who can design them, build them, put them together, put them into devices, design the devices that use them. And so I have to have the technical knowledge to actually understand that all. But I also have to have like the grounding from political science, social sciences, psychology, education leadership to figure out how that layer of technology works in all of our systems. And so if you're talking about, right, some of the activities we do, as well as the things that I like most about them, it's that I get to take all of these different pieces and put them together. When we do the work at CSforAll, we have this huge national membership of over 850 organizations. You can see them on our website, csforall.org. And if I'm going to apply the computer science brain for a second, I want CSforAll to be a little bit like Netflix. And what makes Netflix awesome? It's not that only that they have this huge repository of things, because libraries also have huge repositories of things. And if all Netflix did was put them on a shelf for you to see, they'd be Blockbuster. And Blockbuster died. But what Netflix does is it actually uses AI to help you find the things that matter most to you. Amazon does the same thing. For some reason, it knows you really like those boots and should buy them. And so what I want to do is use those artificial intelligence principles in order to find the right computer science education resource for your teacher, for your school, for your community, to really help you all get this kind of knowledge and learning as a part of your everyday school.
Thank you. So as the executive director of CS4All and previously as director of research and education at CSNYC, what would you say that the biggest challenges in having students become more engaged with computing are?
Yeah. We're fighting against a lot of stereotypes. And for once, I think it's less the individual kids, the youth, like yourself, who are living and breathing them. It's all of the adults. And so I talk a lot about how our systems underestimate youth. I feel like I was underestimated in that moment where my guidance counselor was like, do you really want to go to college? They should be like, no, here's like the best math schools and how you get into them, right? Or, maybe you should think about this computing thing. I can't tell you the number of stories that I've heard from young men and women from all walks of this country who are like, yeah, I thought that was interesting, but nobody ever told me that I could do it. And so I think the hardest thing is changing hearts and minds, especially of the adults who put guardrails on the pathways you all are trying to walk, right? The career pathways of today look nothing like the ones even 5 years ago. And that's really hard to keep up, right? And they're going to look nothing like the ones 5 years from now. More and more companies talk about the need for soft skills and for folks who can do this crazy mix of things. And they need people like me who are like, oh, I can use AI to pull together all these resources and get them in front of people. I can see how I can use this crazy pile of tech to actually distill. We do a lot of white papers that go to policymakers. And a couple of years ago, we partnered with the Office of Science and Technology Policy to look at like AI and data science education. So we need people who can take all of what technology does, understand how technology does good or bad. And I'm sure a lot of you are having conversations about like, what does ChatGPT do wrong in your classes? Fix it, right? Because technology is just replicating all the bad decisions we've made in the past. Fix it. And then be really good partners, collaborators, communicators, so that those ideas you have about how to fix it can actually turn into things really in the world, whether they be algorithms, whether they be communities, whether they be businesses or schools, if you're going into education, any of those pieces. And so I think what, for me, the biggest thing is trying to break down these ideas that people are only going to be one thing. If you're only going to be one thing, then either you're like a STEM person or a humanities person. We need to be all the things. And you're going to have strengths within that. Don't think you have to be excellent at all of the things, but you're going to be part of a team that's using all of these things to solve problems in the world. So that's what I think is the biggest challenge, because it's different. And it's something that a lot of adults, even today, they're sort of kind of experiencing it, but they haven't stepped back and really looked at it to say, oh, this is what I do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I know that CSforAll also works closely with professional computing associations like the Association for Computing Machinery, or ACM. Can you discuss how such collaboration works?
Sure. Does your audience know what the ACM is?
Uh, I think we could go over it really quickly.
Yeah. So ACM is the international standarding body for everything computing. Think about it like the UN, but just focused on computing, right? And that's the kind of scope and scale. They give out the Turing Awards, which are very much like the Nobel Prizes for computing. And they have a global membership of professionals, researchers, scientists, everybody, like in the hundreds of thousands. So that kind of gives you, as you name that organization, I want people to understand the scope and scale. I actually just got back from Vancouver last week. I'm a part of ACM's Education Council. And so what we were discussing last week was the global like standards for what it means to graduate with an undergraduate computing degree. Like, what is all the things you have to learn in school in order to get that? And the needs of university faculty in order to be able to deliver that content, right? So just like new technology comes down the pike, that doesn't mean automatically that every university has a faculty member who knows how ChatGPT works. Many of us can go and read the scientific articles and paper and kind of figure out a little bit, but that's not the same as being able to like run a whole course on it or teach it. Otherwise, there'd be a lot more startup companies using ChatGPT, although they're all coming. And so CSforAll actually I'm CSforAll's representative, and we had a small report out around the state of K-12 education. So my job is to not only try and influence what's happening in K-12, but to collect information about it and bring it to these other partners, including ACM, the Computer Science Teachers Association, any of the funders we work with, any of the corporate partners who are also trying to support education, and make sure they understand, like, what is it that your school's doing really well? What is it that the teachers are doing really well? And where do they need help? And how can these partners and external resources provide that help in a lot of different ways? Sometimes it's data, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's mentors. Some of you may be experiencing mentorship programs. Sometimes it's help for your teacher. The TEALS program does a great job connecting professionals with teachers in classrooms and high schools. And so all of those things together are a big part of our partnership, is about shining a light on this big picture. And again, like I said, like I described, I collected the data, did the work, and now I have to communicate and collaborate. If I tried to solve every problem all by myself, I'd be very tired and probably out of money. And my daughter would be really sad because she wouldn't see me at all.
Yeah, thank you. So shifting more towards social justice and adding on a bit, you're also part of the ACM Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. Could you talk a bit more about its role and your work within that?
Yeah, and I know that DEI and social justice is right now a really hot button topic across the United States. And that there's a lot of messages in a lot of communities about what it is and why it's important. And so I don't think I can talk about what I do on the council without actually talking about why the council invests in this work, right? So as I mentioned, ACM is a global endeavor, which means they serve Africa. And I'm sure in all of your history classes, you've talked about the challenges on the African continent with drought, with political unrest, right? Even thinking about the Arab Spring and the uprisings in Egypt a number of years ago, where they used Twitter explicitly as a communication mechanism to get around how the government was censoring the internet and communication channels among the protesters. So if you think about each of those unique situations, I want you, each of you individually, to think for a minute, could you identify with someone growing up in sub-Saharan Africa, living in an area that was experiencing famine, perhaps from drought, and recognizing that by having a diverse set of members, making sure they feel welcome and included in ACM as a professional body, we get that ability to tap into what people know about where they're from, how they grew up, and how their life experiences matter, in a way that makes us all better. Companies that have teams that represent a bunch of different perspectives, whether that be urban, rural, male, female, Black or white, Hispanic, Asian, like all the different races, nationality, socioeconomic status, like all of those layers actually outperform by at least 30% revenue to other companies. So it's also like better for business, which is why you see a lot of companies leaning into DEI. They make more money when they make sure that their diverse team members don't quit. Like that's a bottom line thing, capitalism at its best. And so the work that the DEI community does for ACM is they make sure that because the leadership of ACM, like many companies, primarily comes from one background and one continent. Our job in the DEI committee is to ask the questions like, so how are our assumptions shaping this culture and community? For example, until a few years ago, there was no dedicated space for nursing mothers at conferences. And so there was no way, if a mom had come and like brought their kid and arranged for childcare during the day while they were at this professional event, but still was trying to feed them, there was no way they could like step aside to do that. So conferences have now started to offer daycare. They've started to offer nursing rooms as a way to recognize that these women are an important part of our scientific community. And they just have a need to be able to participate fully. There are clear rules in ACM around harassment of any kind. And then the thing about DEI is it goes beyond harm. And this is where it gets to be a little bit controversial. So it's not just about how do we not cause harm. Please don't hit someone with a baseball bat, right? At the like jump the shark level. And if you haven't heard the jump the shark expression, it means like to be completely absurd. So to not be absurd, that's not what's happening. Nobody's running around with a baseball bat and you see it. But on the other side, like there's this sense of not belonging. And I know you all are in high school. I am sure that you feel like you don't belong sometimes. And so what DEI is about is trying to make sure that we do the things to make sure that people don't feel like they don't belong. And that is really at the heart of everything. So we are reviewing the way that ACM like promotes awards, making sure that communities feel like everybody is welcome to apply. There's been this whole work around job descriptions to be gender neutral, because so many times in a job description, you use male pronouns only, which makes it so subtle, right? But as a woman reading that, I might be like, oh, that job's not for me, right? We also are looking at who is available and held up. So if the only, so ACM has this like distinguished scholars where you can reach out and they will come and speak in your academic institution and ACM will pay for it. If the only people in that list are white men from North America, right? It's a global organization. There should be people from all over, and there are amazing people of every race and color from every country in the world who are doing cool things and should be part of that list. And so that's our job in the DEI community. And I actually just finished my term on the commission. And so I'm rolling off so other members can step up and take on that work.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. Could you talk a bit more broadly about how organizations like CS4All encourage diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things, and this goes back to like making adults aware, is CS for All has a core piece of its work to raise awareness. And so our upcoming summit in October in Oakland, and if anybody is in the California area, we welcome you, your parents, your teachers. Reach out to me, Leigh Ann at CSforAll.org. If you want to come as a student, I'm sure I can get you like a discounted rate. But one of the things we do is there's a lot of research around what makes for good teaching, right? And a lot of good teaching is making students feel included in the classroom. And so we help to share out examples of that. We find great examples from our membership. We also like let people know like this is what high quality means. High quality means that you have an equal number of girls and boys in your classroom for computer science. That you don't brush it off like, oh, they're just not interested. No, actually, they probably are, but aren't sure if they belong. We help share resources from the National Center for Women in Information Technology and the KPOR Center and Constellation Center for Equity in Computing that have everything, and the Computer Science Teachers Association, that have everything from posters for your walls as teachers, all the way down to like handouts for parents in multiple languages, so that no matter who is there, they can feel like they're welcome and included and that this can be for them. And we do a lot of work with school administrators and guidance counselors to help them see the bigger picture that computing is a part of this. And so the work we do for DEI is prioritizing that for the national community, and then a lot of lifting up the amazing work that our members do on the ground every day.
Yeah, thank you so much. So how can students like me work towards a more equitable and inclusive computer science field?
Yeah. You know, I think there's two things you can do. And first, it's really ask the hard questions, right? Is this technology actually serving DEI and our community and humanity, or is it making somebody money? Right? You know, how your job as youth and right now in all of the learning spaces that you're in is you're coming to the world with fresh eyes. So you're seeing all of the ways that we've all screwed up and some of the biggest movements for climate change, right? Some of the biggest movements for political action. Right now, the game for gun reform, it's all starting with youth voice. And so use your voices, ask the hard questions, talk to your peers. Do we really want to be using this platform? And if not, I can tell you, if all of you walked away from TikTok, right, they would change for what you wanted. And so, how do you ask those questions and be clear about what matters to you as a generation? And that I think is the biggest value because y'all are consumers. And underneath it all these technology companies, they have to pay their shareholders. And so, how you consume and the choices you make about what you consume can actually have an impact on the way in which technology is developed and deployed into the world. And on the flip side of things, learn about how technology is developed and deployed into the world. Whether you are going to be the developer, or you're going to be the manager of the developer, or the company that hires a company that does development work, the more you understand about the risks of shortcuts, ChatGPT is a huge shortcut right now. And there are all kinds of risks associated with it. I know you all have like done what I've done occasionally and gotten lost in the internet. Think about getting lost in the internet and what you find. It's part of ChatGPT's data set in many cases. And so the more you learn about what it means for something to be trained on all the data on the internet, to have that critical lens to say, oh, maybe we shouldn't, Um, or even to say like, well, how do we do that better? Maybe we do want to train on all the data on the internet, but we want to flag the things that are actually the opposite of the society we want. How do I write an algorithm that not only takes into account the value proposition, but like the anti-value proposition? To not just steer for the next recommended word from the whole thing, but actually to like make a better decision about what it should be, right? And that's going to take study, and that's going to take another generation of scientists who are curious and know how the pieces work. And you know, to cure cancer, we're going to need computer scientists who think differently from the way that we do. To fix the way that misinformation around the globe has impacted political process everywhere. Like that's not just the United States, it's everywhere. We're going to need people who understand the technology that's delivering that misinformation. And so what you can do is you can talk about that with your friends as you talk about what you might want to do next. It doesn't have to be that you're just going to like be the old 10-year ago version of a software developer that lives in a basement and types code, right? You're actually going to think about how the pieces fit together and work in teams to make a better society. And hopefully that inspires some of your peers too, to at least get some fundamental learning and think about technology in whatever direction that they go as well.
Thank you very much. So, what advice would you have for high school students who would like to get into computer science or even computing in general?
You know, I think probably most of you, the next step in your journey is going to be college applications. Or using, if you're not college bound, perhaps thinking about one of the boot camp academies that exist in communities across America. And maybe even weighing the difference between the two, because I know college costs a lot of money, student loans are a real thing. And I would say that either way, what's going to make you stand out is going to be what you want to do with technology and what you've done so far. So think about if you can take a class in your local high school. If you can't, try and find an after school program, a summer program, and as a part of that work, build something. And build something you're proud of, and build something you're excited about, and then talk about it. Talk about it in your admissions essay. Use it as a part of an internship portfolio for application, or find a boot camp school that's going to let you build on it to make it more sophisticated, and use that to apply for a job when you're done. And so here at CSforAll, I joke that I only want to hire employees where the light shines behind their eyes for the work. And I can tell you that software companies and folks who are hiring in this field, yes, there's a lot of job openings, but they want to know that someone's going to come in and be like, you company that's building this cool thing, I want to be a part of that. I want to be someone who contributes to the technology you have. And I want to be someone who brings my brain that has already contributed to technology in this way and has thought a little differently about it than maybe anybody else you know, to your team. Because there's a little bit of a secret. When you're doing computer science in school, whether it be middle school, high school, college, you do a lot of work alone. But when you do computer science in any professional setting, you're almost never alone. Every company is trying to build a team, and they're trying to look for a complementary set of skills and knowledge and ideas that make what they're building stronger. And so if you can be like, hey, I came at this thing in a new way. And if you're a nerd like me, you're like, oh, I munged this data in this interesting way and it taught me this thing. And here's what changed because of what I've learned, right? I made an app for my school because I figured out that kids really wanted to know the calorie counts, but they really of what the food was, but they really didn't want to have to go to like 6 different links on the district website. They wanted to be able to make real-time decisions while they were waiting online to pick up their food, right? And so I built this app for that. That storytelling, it sounds a little bit like Shark Tank, and it is. That storytelling of like, I saw a problem, I built a thing, or I imagined a thing. That is always going to help you, one, get into the next thing you want to do, but also maybe even help you think about what that next thing should be. Because if you truly want to get into the deep design of algorithms, the application of AI, you're going to need an undergraduate degree in computer science. If you want to get a job right away, testing code, building websites, then a bootcamp school might work. But I'd still think, especially with the rapid advances in technology, go to night school, get your degree over time, even though I know that being able to go full time with the cost of loans isn't always everybody's first path, right? So really try and build something and then let it help guide you in what your best next steps are to following that pathway.
Thank you very much. So this is always the hardest question, but where do you think that computing is going in the future?
Yeah. Oh, no, there's so many different directions. And I think we're going to go into, so if you think about computing 40 years ago, 50 years ago, the separation between the computer and the user was barely existing. In order to use a computer, you had to like understand all the bits and the details of it. And over time, that separation grew to the point where we use computers nowadays that we don't even know are computers. And I think that that gap is going to continue to widen, and it's dangerous because the computers are ubiquitous. And so what's going to happen is the function of the computers is going to get further from the user. It already happens to us when we shop online. It's not clear that the list of things that I see in Amazon is different from the list of things that you see in Amazon. There's already algorithms that are shaping what I choose to read, what I choose to buy, what I know about my friends. And there's this whole conversation in the World Economic Forum about labeling, like what's AI driven, whatever. Even if, honestly, even if it had a little label that said this is AI powered, how it made that recommendation to us is getting further and further from perceivable and knowable. And so I think what computing is going to do is it's going to change our lives in so many ways that because we always get things wrong first, right? Before humanity comes back around and tries to fix it. Everything. We got society wrong. We got governments wrong. We had kings and queens for the longest time before we got around to democracy, right? We get things wrong first before we come back around to fixing it right. And what we're going to do is we're going to get technology wrong. It's going to change the landscape of the world in a way that is hard for us to perceive. Like, we're not going to notice it in the same way we're not noticing it. And so I think computing first is going to go in this space where it's going to be less and less noticeable, actually to the detriment, even more so than where it is now, as AI makes it even more human-like, where you think it might be a human. And then I hope that if we're really smart, we'll start to use technology to rein in technology. We'll start to use technology to do better in perceiving all the ways that our old technology is making things worse. We've already started to see data science being more socially justice minded, being more thoughtful about how it's gathering data and sharing it, using data science to say how data science is falling down. And so I think technology is going to go to this like extreme where it's going to be less visible and change the world in ways we may not want. But I'm hoping that your generation is going to come back in and be like, that's not the society we want. That's not the world we want to live in. figure out how to use technology to rein in technology.
Yeah, thank you so much for meeting with me and for being willing to do this interview.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Um, I just like if I can leave you guys with anything, it's find a question that inspires you and just dig in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.